So hey, I'm James Nash, and I wanted to show you a little bit about my live acoustic guitar rig here, which is a little bit unusual and strange, and it's something that I put together over a number of years that really works for me, and I'll tell you a little bit about it and kind of why I use something that is this odd. I'm playing, starting from the normal and beautiful. This is a Santa Cruz OM guitar that I've had a long time. Love this guitar. It's very balanced, and it sounds real good on stage because it doesn't have too much of a boomy low end, which I find is one of the biggest problems you can run into trying to amplify an acoustic guitar. And I have a pickup and a microphone in here. In the bridge, this is an LB6 Baggs saddle, which is an original Baggs saddle. And then I have a DPA Omni condenser microphone down in the guitar. And both of those are wired directly to a stereo jack on my guitar. So I don't have any electronics in my guitar. And that's for a number of reasons. One, I've always hated having to dig into the guitar and try to get a battery out, and it always seems to go dead right during sound check or right before you're about to go on stage. But also because I fly a lot. And so a lot of the reason for existing for this whole rig for me is trying to come up with something that I can fly with that's as light and cheap and easy to pack as possible and gets me as much power in a package that I can deal with paying for, as the airline fees keep getting higher and things keep getting knocked around more and more. But so directly to the jack, no electronics, no batteries, no preamp or anything in here, and it runs into a Pendulum in-pen that's stereo. It takes the pickup and the mic, and then from there it goes straight into a MOTU audio interface. So basically mic preamps in here, and I'm running my pickup and my mic separately, and then from here it's all digital in the computer. And this is where it kind of gets terrifying because it's running into Logic, and this is a really complex program that frankly took me like months to understand and figure out how to use on stage. So I wouldn't recommend that you necessarily get into a rig like this lightly, but if this is a world that you'd like to live in, if you do a lot of stuff with your home studio and feel comfortable recording and sort of managing sessions and stuff, this is a great way to get a ton of power on stage without having to bring a lot of gear. You can see all I've got here is a laptop, a little audio interface, and a MIDI pedal and a volume pedal, which goes into my MIDI pedal, and all that is just to control the computer. The sound is just going in and out of this audio interface. But the deal is, pickup and the mic go in here separately, and then I EQ them using plugins in Logic, and I can EQ my bridge pickup to emphasize the low end a little bit to kind of fill out the sound, and then I can scoop out the pickup to deal with feedback and that kind of thing. So I'll show you here this curve that I've got, which is pretty extreme on the microphone. So that's what I start with. So you can see there's a ton of low end getting rolled off on that microphone. And already we're kind of doing something that it would be hard for me to pack into a 50-pound case on an airplane just to get that amount of EQ power. But what's really cool about this is when I sound check, I can ring this out. So let's say that I crank up at sound check, and you guys have probably, if you played on stages, especially with drums, you've probably experienced what I have, which is everything sounds great at soundcheck, and then you get up on stage and suddenly everything's feeding back and you don't know why. And I think that the reason why is usually pretty clear. It's usually because they bumped the volume up like 50% when the actual show started and people got excited and stuff. So what I try to do is soundcheck really loud, so hopefully I deal with whatever feedback problems I run into there. So like here, now you can see I'm feeding back now. What I can do at soundcheck is turn on a little frequency analyzer. So that's actually showing my microphone output. And so when it starts to feed back, you can see it right there at 100 hertz. And I can just grab that in my plug-in, pull it down a bunch. So now, same volume, it's not feeding back. Pretty cool. Then if I decide, well, you know, it's gotten a little bit thin because I pulled out all that 100 hertz, I can pull up the EQ that's on my pickup here and boost the 100 hertz a little bit. And now I'm like really big and loud with no feedback. So it works really well for ringing out a sound like that. And realistically, like, it would take me a lot more time to do that if I hadn't done this a lot on stage. So part of this is like getting to know the guitar, finding what frequencies are feeding back on the guitar and learning where they are, so that when you hear that like low rumble around your G string, you can say, well, that's either 100 or 200, and you get used to hearing the difference between them. So like literally, like if I have to set up in 20 minutes at a festival and start going and suddenly I'm feeding back, ideally I can reach back there and in 5 seconds, you know, pull down a couple of things and fix my guitar a lot better than they could out at the house, because my pickup and my microphone are actually getting processed separately here, so I can scoop out the mic and still leave some of the lows in the pickup so the whole guitar just doesn't get real thin. But let me show you a little bit more about this rig. I know it's probably already, I think, more than a lot of people would want to do with their rig, but so there's a delay, just a plug-in that's kicked in. So basically the deal with all these sounds that I've got, I'm just turning things on and off on the laptop. So I took a lot of time to go in here and program this stuff so that when I press a button on here, it gets processed in Logic, it turns on the appropriate plug-in, or in some cases like turn stuff off. So check this out. I press one button and I go from this to this. One more button to go to this. So what I'm doing there is getting an electric sound by running through a plugin called Amplitude, which is sort of a normal thing that you would do in a recording studio. You might mess around with the track, like you might have a rhythm guitar track like this or something, and you decide, you know, what would that sound like with a little bit of distortion on it? And it's like, well, that's kind of cool, I might use that in my track. But what's hard about that on stage is once you get your nice pristine acoustic guitar sound like this, which has a lot of microphone going in it, if you put distortion on that, you will just get howling feedback. So what I found really works, what I really wanted to do with my rig was press one button, turn off the microphone, and then put a ton of distortion on the pickup. And I couldn't come up with any way without using like 5 rack spaces of gear to do that easily with one button. So I programmed the whole thing in here in Logic. So it's amazing the kind of power that you get when you move to a rig like this. But of course the complexity level goes up. So, you know, it's definitely the kind of thing where whenever I make any changes to this, like I spend hours at home playing with it just to make sure that I didn't break something and testing all the stuff out before I take it up on stage. And then when I go out on a tour, I do not touch this laptop system. I boot onto a different partition on the drive when I want to do email and web and stuff like that. And this just stays the way that it is, so I can make sure that it doesn't crash from show to show. Cool, so a couple other things I'll show you here. I've got a Peterson Tuner, which I've got kind of partly hidden just because my screen's kind of small, but it's enough that I can see the key part, which is that, to tune. So, you know, I press one button and it mutes me in the house and gives me a nice strobe tuner over there, which I like everything about, except I always put the computer behind me, and it means I have to turn around to tune. So that's, you know, something you might want to think about if you put together a rig like this, is it might be cool to have the rig down at your feet, but then again, if it's down at your feet, it's kind of in the way a lot of the time, and it's this thing in between you and the front row. So, you know, you got to kind of figure that all out. But the tuner is really nice to have there. But you're hearing one output from this audio interface, but I actually use inner monitors with this, and I mix the monitors with the computer too. So I split my vocal mic into the computer. It's already got my guitar, of course, because it's going through there. And then I get a send from the house, and sometimes I split a few more lines off the stage, and I run a bunch of other inputs in here, and this fader right here is showing what's actually going to my monitor rig, which I don't have set up. So when I put ears in, I can dial up this patch and everything is exactly the same as it was last night, which is really cool, because we can kind of get to a standardized thing in a band where I set this up and it's almost 100%, you know, without even me having to touch anything. And maybe I turn up the fiddle player a little bit, or I turn my vocal down or something, but it doesn't take much. So it's really nice being able to store all that stuff. And because I've got all those lines coming in for the monitor, it occurred to me one day, like I was just doing it like that. It was like, wow, I could just record all this stuff, and maybe I could use this. So I started coming up with different ways of splitting the lines in there to where I was recording 5, 6, 7, sometimes even 8 different tracks at a time, and recording the whole show that way. So I would set up a little mic on the stage to pick up the drums and get a feed from the house with some extra stuff. And it created this series that the Waybacks did called the Secret Stage Mixes, where we actually released 4 albums that were recorded on this rig, exactly what you see here, into this laptop, while it was processing my guitar sound and everything, also recording all the tracks. And then I took the tracks home and I mixed it a little bit, and we released them as records. So we were pretty psyched to do that, and we still haven't told our record label about that because I don't think it was technically part of our contract. So I hope you guys aren't mad at us. But it worked out. It was a great way for a band to get some some extra money, frankly, for our tours, was to start releasing shows and selling them that way online. And the last thing I should say, Logic is one of the more complicated pieces of software out there, and I kind of started using Logic because I was already using it for songwriting and for recording. But there are easier ways to get a lot of what I'm doing here done without nearly as much programming. So for instance, Mainstage is Apple's version where you can run a lot of these same plugins and hook up a MIDI pedal, and you don't have the same flexibility with recording and making separate mixes and stuff. But if you just want to run your guitar in, have some cool EQ and effects and reverb and stuff, Mainstage can be a cool way to do that. And for electric guitar, you can also use standalone stuff like Guitar Rig and Amplitude, and I've had good luck with them. The main reason I use Logic is I can kind of do all of that all together in one program and do all this cool recording and stuff on top of it, which has worked out really well for me. But again, like I definitely warn you, like it gets more complicated, and you're dealing with a lot of stuff. So test it before you take it on stage. So hey, I'm James Nash. This is my rig. I hope you enjoyed checking it out there, and I'd encourage you guys to experiment with computer-based stage rigs if you can. There's not a lot of them in the acoustic world, but I think maybe there should be. And if you want to read more about this, you can check that out at Acoustic Guitar magazine. And I hope to see you soon.